University, and I suppose you could class Denise as a fellow NHS person like myself. Denise has been doing some stuff with healthcare education and virtual reality learning environments, so I shall hand over.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this session. I really feel honored that you've chosen to come and have a listen to my research and what I've been doing. I've turned off chat because I'm very easily distracted. So Richard, please could you just let me know when I've got 5 minutes, just tell me verbally because I won't see it. And anyone that's got any questions.
I'll take the questions for the end as well.
Thank you. It worked, good. As Richard said, I work for BU. I also work for the NHS 1 day a week. I'm still a clinician, but I'm a lecturer in midwifery and I'm also a public health practitioner. I'm a good clinician. I've been a clinician for a very long time, many decades. As you can probably tell, I'm not in the first flush of youth. And students tell me I'm a good teacher, but I'm not a particularly good academic, I have to confess. And I was frog marched into doing a doctorate. I was really very reluctant, but it is the done thing. So I finally agreed under duress. And I really like cake. I like baking cake. I like eating cake. And it became a running joke with my classmates. I did a taught doctorate because I felt I really couldn't just launch into a doctorate like some people seem to be able to do. And a taught doctorate was definitely the best thing I ever went for because it's really helped me at this stage that I'm at now. But my classmates began to challenge me to use increasingly obscure baking references in my submissions because we had to do 6 submissions for the first part of the taught phase of our doctorate. But I did actually bake my way through my thesis in real life too. The more stressed I got with the writing, the more I baked and the more elaborate the things that I baked became. But certainly some of the obscure baking references I was challenged to use within my submissions were things like, well, it started out easy, cupcakes and layer cakes. And that was fairly easy to disguise, as you can see in my presentation there. There's some things. And then we went on to things like a kringle, a croquembouche, pithivier, and so on. So that was a bit of lightheartedness to the thesis, but in all seriousness, what I researched was the impact of virtual reality in healthcare education. And I've developed virtual reality learning environments which are topic specific, but profession generic so that it can be useful to more types of healthcare students. And actually, this also includes clinicians using it for continuous practice development or continuous professional development. It isn't intended to replace traditional teaching, but it's intended to be another tool in the box. And they're already in use within our curriculum now, but they really came into their own during COVID, as you can imagine, because we had to switch very rapidly onto online teaching. In fact, we converted the midwifery program within 10 days to fully online teaching, which I am still proud of because at that time, I was still personally trying to frog march my colleagues into using more virtual things for teaching and for meetings, and they were very resistant to it. But of course, everybody really worked together as a team to change midwifery program over to fully online delivery. And other than a very small amount of clinical practice that we must teach face-to-face, we're all able to stay safe when we're teaching and work from home. So some of the things I researched, I had 311 pre-intervention and 253 post-intervention research participants take part in testing out the virtual reality learning environments and looking at several things, which are what I'm going to go through and talk to you about. And as you can see, this is a traditional classroom in Bournemouth University. We're split across 2 campuses. We have a campus in Bournemouth, we have a campus in Portsmouth, so we have an east and a west campus. So this is our smaller cohort on the east campus. And what they're doing here is they're taking, they're participating in shared learning, looking at a safeguarding scenario. And this is safeguarding is taught as a theme day. They have a full theme day across each of their 3 years. And I developed virtual reality learning environments, 2 of them, which support safeguarding learning. And they can, students can go in and they can interact with a virtual family. They're all represented as avatars, and there's multiple safeguarding issues that can be picked up within these scenarios. What you can see on the slide here is a postpartum hemorrhage scenario, which isn't obviously a safeguarding scenario. This is for third-year students, and the research was done with the safeguarding scenarios, and it was to look at the impact, particularly on their learning overall. And the research participants were able to access the virtual learning environments, use it whenever they wanted to for as long as they liked. They could use it on campus, off campus, etc., wherever they had their own handheld mobile device, PC, laptop. And they were able to learn in isolation if they wished to do so, or to learn synchronously as well. And with the synchronous learning is particularly useful for things like the postpartum hemorrhage scenario, where we do, although we are autonomous practitioners in midwifery, we do need to work as part of a larger collective for emergency scenarios such as postpartum hemorrhage. So it's quite useful for students to be able to go in and learn with other healthcare practitioners in situations such as that. And these are experiences that we can't really otherwise guarantee as part of their healthcare education. But this is one way that we can give them the experience of working and learning and safeguarding and caring for patients. So the overall impact on learning was noted to be positive by 85.8% of the research participants. I also looked at the impact on confidence. Traditional learning exercises for healthcare students and lecturers are able to be translated into virtual learning environments through the use of storyboarding. And 94% of the research participants noted an increase in confidence. And this was compared to 86.8% pre-use. So 86.8% pre-use expected to have an impact on confidence, but 94% of them noted a positive impact on their confidence levels. As you can see here, this is a difference between, you know, a regular simulation mannequin, and they're quite clever. We can get them to do a lot of things. We can mimic the sound of heartbeats, etc., and so on. They can touch and they can handle them, but they don't look very realistic. And within, for example, the postpartum hemorrhage scenario here, the woman is actively, visibly bleeding off the bed onto the floor. It's very realistic, much as we would see in real life clinical practice. Very, very useful in terms of getting your adrenaline going, learning how to think in an emergency situation where there's lots of things, different things going on, and lots of people that you have to interact with and play your own part with, and particularly for the person who has to coordinate management of the emergency, which is something we all need to know how to do by the time we reach actual qualified clinical practice. Obviously, I'm a big fan of virtual learning environments, but the students are also, you know, giving us the same sort of feedback in what the experience is like for them and the benefits that they're finding with these virtual reality learning environments. So this is one of the safeguarding scenarios that you can see here. This is the Melser family. You can see inside that they're quite socially deprived on multiple levels. They don't have a lot of money to spend on things that we would see as very basic. There's mold on the walls, the wallpaper's peeling off. There's lots of debris and clutter around. The kids aren't particularly clean, and neither is the mother. You know, and there's lots of things that may distract the students from the actual situation, which is that actually the mother is abusing the father, which is people often, when they think of domestic abuse, think that it's male to female, but in this scenario that the students can experience, it's actually female to male. And there's also some safeguarding issues going on with the students in terms of them being safe outside of the home, etc., and so on. And one of the things that's really, really important in healthcare is us being able to humanize that healthcare, to really empathize and really understand and feel for the people we're caring for, and to not let that impact on the decisions that we have to make as healthcare professionals. And we also need to be able to be comfortable with utilizing intuitive practice. So we all have hard skills that are really easy to learn, the doing of things to people, taking their blood pressure, taking their bloods, do. But the humanization of our healthcare is so important and really often difficult to teach in the clinical situation. But But being human is what makes it health care. It isn't just the doing of things to people and doing things to patients. And being able to use our clinical intuition allows us to pick up on things which patients might not be telling us with words, but there might, be things that they're dropping or things that we can see that are helping us piece together the picture. We need to be able to do that, and we need a space that we can learn that isn't always in a highly pressurized situation, such as safeguarding or emergency situations. And the virtual reality learning environment, I wanted to see whether they were able to allow students to do these things, because otherwise, in terms of healthcare, they aren't probably that useful. And what we found from the research participants' feedback, which was quantitative and qualitative, was that 77.9% of them felt that the VRLE supported them to practice the humanization of their healthcare skills. And I think for me, in terms of my research, that's one of the most important things that I've found. So I also looked at the clinical intuition, gut instinct, you might know it as. Research has shown already that if you, okay, there's two schools of thought with this. Some people say that clinical intuition isn't really a thing. Other people say that it is very much actually a clinical skill that needs to be learned. Whereas other people go, well, actually, it's just things that we've learned and we're piecing them together. But I would say to you that, if a woman can walk into a birthing room and I can think this is going to go wrong. And I couldn't tell you why I think that, but I'm always right. So for whatever reason, clinical intuition does work, and it does help shape the care that we give. We might monitor the woman more closely, for example, if our clinical intuition is telling us there's something else going on. It also helps keep us safe in terms of situations where we might be at risk of harm. And we can't help care for a woman if we're going to end up harmed in a situation. So clinical intuition, I'm firmly in the camp that clinical intuition is real and it works. So what the research from this project showed was that the virtual reality learning environment offers a space where actually there is physical manifestation of psychological engagement with the characters. So the students engage so much with these avatars that they actually feel physical reactions to the situation. So in this one, which is the Paravel family, at one point the husband comes home, and in this situation there is male to female abuse, and she's quite clearly been battered. You can see it. And when he walks in the room, the student's avatar is in a position where he blocks their access to the door. And one of the things we teach students from quite early on in their training is you must always be closest to the door. You must always have a route of escape when you're doing lone working in someone's home. And they all commented on the fact that they felt very uncomfortable. Their means of escape from this virtual home was cut off. And 90% of them believed that the VRLE offered opportunities to learn and practice their clinical intuition, their gut instinct within this scenario, particularly for the Paravel family. But there are numerous indicators of potential for harm to the infants and the children and the families, and indeed the students themselves within the safeguarding VRLEs. And then I wanted to look at whether there was any onward impact, whether it was a perceived onward impact in relation to service user safety, the patients themselves. And I didn't research this with the actual service users because that's a whole different set of research ethics that I would need to achieve. But what I wanted to see was whether students felt that it was going to help them and it was going to improve their patients or the women they care for, whether the safety related to that. Previous research showed that confidence is really paramount to the improvement of patient care, because confident practice is irrevocably linked to effective clinical decision making. And within the research that I did, this was confirmed by 85% of respondents who felt that use of the VRLE would have a positive onward impact for their patient care and their patient safety. And in this image here, it's again from the Paravel home. So in the far part of this image, there's a little boy sleeping in a dog crate. And so students do get, they're able to indicate whether their gut instinct, their alarm bells are going off and at what points. And then they do get feedback about why that's incorrect or correct, and reasonings why, you know. So particularly we're talking about the Dog Trust Safety Charity advice about, you know, dogs need their own place to sleep. It doesn't matter how friendly they are with the family, they need their own space, just as, you know, everyone else in the family does. Here, this man who is unknown to the student at that point is fast asleep on the couch with the baby. And this is just a close-up of the baby. So when the student goes to examine the baby within the scenario, the student should note that there's subconjunctival hemorrhaging, which is indicative of a head injury, particularly for this baby, because this baby is 14 days old at this point. So even if it was subconjunctival hemorrhaging related to, for example, a birth injury, which does happen sometimes and is unfortunate, but doesn't go on to cause long-term harm, at 14 days, a healthy child, this would have healed. And so the student needs to kind of pick up on these and think about it, and convince this very challenging man, who's also a healthcare professional, that it's in his child's best interest for the child to be transferred to hospital. And meanwhile, he's blocking your access to the door to leave. He may have abused his wife. There's this unnamed person asleep on the couch who isn't the husband. All these sorts of things are going on. The students in the middle of this tumultuous kind of scenario, and they have to make decisions. Of course, they can leave at any time, but they're within this scenario and they're so absorbed in it that they kind of forget that, and they're experiencing it physiologically as well as psychologically. And they find that learning is really positive and beneficial for them. I'm just heading on to my slide for now. I'm just covering up your chat because it's too distracting for me, but I promise I'll look at it in a sec and take any questions. This is the project that I'm now working on. I'm working on a digital health project with Southern Health NHS Trust to develop a digital suite of healthcare options for service users, their families, their carers, and also the healthcare teams. So the project's very much in its infancy now. I just started it in September, and it should last for at least about another 18 months. But there's very exciting things happening already. Looking at next week after 22nd, I've got a meeting with actual service users to talk about them, because of course at the moment we don't know what we don't know. And so it's about going to them and saying, these are the kind of things we might be able to offer you. What do you think? Do you think that would be useful? What kind of thing, why don't you think it'll be useful? Or what might you find useful for you? And sort of trying to unpick it, because when I used to work in public health full time, I always found that really useful. When I was petitioning to the budgeting departments to get funding for services, and we're talking hundreds of thousands and millions of pounds for these services, to talk to service users and find out what they wanted would prevent a service being developed that actually wasn't very useful. And NHS does not have money to waste, so it's best to talk to the people that are going to be using the services before you go and invent these things that they may not actually want, or we may not have thought of a reason why they wouldn't use it. So that's where I'm at now with that project. But it's really, really exciting to be working with the NHS now on pulling together a whole suite of digital healthcare, because I genuinely believe that with this digital generation now that we have, and also people in my generation who are coming into line with really understanding the benefits that digital use and access can offer us, this is the way forward. Digital healthcare is going to stay with us. COVID may have pushed us into it sooner than we would have got there, but it is going to stay, and a lot of services will remain digital, I believe. I think that's enough rambling for now, but I'd really love to answer any questions you may have.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Denise. And as suspected, this has generated a lot of questions in it. A round of applause, please, for Denise before we get onto those. So fascinating. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Denise. So I think this is a really interesting use case, particularly the synchronous learning, as so much of the VR that I see is sort of single person learning. And I suppose also the safeguarding, I think, is a really interesting use case, because actually most of the healthcare VR that I see is usually clinical or surgical in nature. So to be able to do group teaching and on a subject that's not sort of mechanical skills is really fantastic.
Well,
So
as a clinician, you really get that as well as a fellow clinician, I know. And you know, it's so important that we really look at not just the doing, but the feeling and the thinking. And
absolutely. So we've got lots of questions, so I'm going to group them all if that's okay with you.
okay.
If I don't call you out specifically your question, please don't be offended. But a few people asked about the development platform and what specific resources and libraries you needed to build the VR.
Oh God! Now, see, I knew, because now I'm not an LT. So what I did was I wrote the storyboard and the content, and a company called Dayton Limited, who are specialist education developers, built it. And I've done several with them: urinalysis, postpartum hemorrhage, safeguarding. So that's who I've worked with. But they're on. Yeah, Dayton, that's right. So they're on Twitter. So if you want to chat to them, they'll be able to tell you all that sort of stuff. Thank you, Gizzy.
Yeah,
I hope I pronounced your name right.
Loads.
But they're fabulous, honestly. Like, they're on WhatsApp for me. When the students begin using it, if I have any problems, they're straight on there. They've always got someone assigned to be troubleshooting. Because of course there's always technical problems, isn't there? And that, I think that's really normal, but it's quite stressful for students when they know they've got a whole day of kind of engaging and they want to be in there and using it. They're very excited by it. So Dayton's always got a technician on standby ready to support. And I've worked with Sussex, Surrey University in the summer for their pharmacology department, who have since hired Dayton to build them a bunch of VRLEs as well. It's very cool.
Fantastic, thank you. We've got about 1 minute left, so I'm going to ask you one.
Sorry.
Then we're going to close, and then I suggest anybody who's interested, we hang around, and hopefully, if you're willing, you'll be able to answer a few more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to put my email address in as well.
Excellent. Okay. So that brings to the end of this session. Thank you all for joining us. We've got a fantastic afternoon still lined up, so lots of things on the agenda, and of course Learning Technologies of the Year at 4:30, so please do join us for that. But again, a big round of applause for both of our speakers, Denise and Ivan.
Thanks.
And if you are able to stay, Denise,
yeah, I can stay for a bit
as well.